Three ways I look at woke progressives. First, I see them as kind of Don Quixote figures. Don Quixote, if you haven't read the novel, is essentially a 50-year-old man who is bored in life, relatively well off, and he starts reading all of these tales of the heroic deeds of knights. And as he reads these tales, he looks around his world and he sees there's no dragons left to slay, so to speak. But he's not going to let that stop him. He wants to become a knight, so he's going to hallucinate dragons, go out and try to fight and kill the dragons. But there's actually no dragons there, right? So the famous scene is he charges at windmills because he hallucinates them as monsters. So when you look at the woke, you have these rich, bored people who have read of the heroic tales of the past, and there's not a whole lot of inequality, injustice in America anymore. It's there, obviously, in pockets, but it's not widespread like it used to be. Still, the woke progressives have the need to slay dragons, so they're going to hallucinate dragons. They start to see your regular traditional conservatives or traditional liberals as monsters, as fascist, and they attack those people. So that's the first way I view them, as kind of people who are warlords without a war, so they have to hallucinate enemies to have a war, to be warlords. They're knights without dragons to slay. They're rebels without a cause, so you have to hallucinate the cause. The second way I look at the woke is as kind of new agers. You can think of them as people who want to be political saints. They want to be unconditionally loving. They almost unconsciously are trying to embody the archetype of St. Francis hugging the leper. So any community that's a minority they view as oppressed. And instead of hugging lepers, what they're doing is they're hugging criminals, they're hugging terrorists, they're hugging assassins, right? So in their attempt to be unconditionally loving, they are showing compassion towards those, excessive compassion to those who they shouldn't. This doesn't mean we, treat criminals terribly or anything, but it does mean we keep criminals behind bars. And if we have to fight and kill terrorists, we do that, not out of joy, but because we know it's necessary to protect innocent people. But the woke have this ineluctable attraction towards the evil elements, and they excuse or explain away bad, evil, wicked behavior. Sometimes they champion it, as we saw with some woke progressives on October 7th. So, one, I see them as Don Quixotes. Two, I see them as New Age. I call them the Namaste woke. They're trying to be unconditionally loving. They're trying to spread love everywhere. That's fairly obvious. This is what's been termed suicidal empathy. I call them political New Agers or the Namaste woke. But as you all know, there's also a viciousness to them. And I think there's almost this compartmentalization, this large unconscious viciousness that they aren't aware of. But we see it, we notice it, like they have a lot of anger and a lot of hate within them. So consciously they think they're being politically loving, unconditionally loving. Unconsciously, which they're almost oblivious to, they're some of the most hateful, bigoted people on planet Earth. So all the woke I meet are generally trying to be good people, but they don't realize that their unconscious has been taken over by a vicious philosophy. And I think that vicious philosophy, you could summarize it as a medieval philosophy, a medieval worldview. And this manifests in a few ways. You can see how they use language like spells or hexes or curses. They'll look at a traditional liberal, conservative, and innocent person and say, and watch how they move their hands even, right? It's almost like they have a wand, like, you are a fascist, you are a racist. And somebody sitting there is like, hold on, I just said I believe in color blindness and merit, right? So they cast hexes and spells, and the hex is supposed to transform somebody into something they're not, or to put a mark on them, a taint on them, so that you're forever, you'll forever be known as this evil entity. Okay, so you see this medieval mindset where they're almost like casting spells or putting hexes on people, and then just like a medieval superstition, there are invisible evil forces at play everywhere in the world. They call it whiteness or the white supremacist patriarchy, and they think it's infested everything. It's infested minds, black minds, white minds, Hispanic minds, Asian minds. This whiteness is everywhere. White supremacy is everywhere. It's in logos, it's in math, it's in physics, right? So you have this evil, ubiquitous force, right, that they have to constantly fight against. So you may not know it, but you are possessed in their mind. They see you as possessed by some evil force, this force of whiteness. Okay, they don't they can't see that they're actually being extremely racist. They talk about whiteness the way the Hutus probably talked about Tutsiness in the mid-90s. So to go along with the hexes and the belief in the invisible forces, there's also symbolic violence. It's the same energy of violence, the same impulse of violence, but it's like channeled into symbolic forms. So instead of detonguing someone, you deplatform them. Instead of guillotining someone, you try to cancel them. Instead of quartering someone, you try to pull them apart from every angle by attacking their family, their friends, their job. You attack them in every way you possibly can. So you can see these medieval impulses. And of course, we're now seeing that symbolic violence starting to express itself physically. We've seen assassination attempts, right? We're seeing destruction of property. We're seeing more justification of actual violence, such as riots and assassinations. So always watch symbolic violence, because it often eventually become actual violence. But that's the three ways I see the woke: as Don Quixotes, as New Agers, the Namaste woke, and then finally as the medieval woke. Combine all of those together and you kind of get a sense of the psychology of woke people, woke prog.